In 2019, Samsung announced its first folding phone, the Samsung Galaxy Fold. Let me also state that the Samsung Z Fold has never existed, it's just called the Fold. That's it. Either way, that phone had some problems. Then, a slightly improved, but very similar version was finally released after a long delay. Then in early 2020, Samsung released this, the Samsung Z Flip. It was cool, but something was missing. Oh yeah, 5G. As well as a modern chipset rocking a Snapdragon 855 Plus processor, while 865 was featured next to it in the Samsung S20. Either way, an awesome phone that I did review, but later in 2020, two phones were released, but only one made sense. The Samsung Z Flip now received the Snapdragon 865 Plus chip and some different color options, but most importantly, 5G. The UFS storage got a little bit faster, but other than that, it's pretty much the same phone. However, the Samsung Fold successor got a new name, the Samsung Z Fold 2, as well as a much better outer screen, inner screen, and especially the design was dramatically changed to look amazing. Now the Flip 5G looked boring. I mean, it wasn't even called the Samsung Z Flip 2. Again, another phone that has never existed. But 1 year later, in August of 2021, Samsung released the updates to both phones, both having the 3 at the end, but only one being worth the upgrade. This is the Samsung Z Flip 3, and yes, I already know what you're thinking, this is the best color that they sell it in. Hello everyone, this is Matt from Real World Review, and yes, I know that intro was long, so let's just get to the review. You know what to do with all the socials listed above. Let's get started. The design of the phone is refreshing, but seems familiar. Well, it took me a minute to see it, but this is what should have launched alongside the Z Fold 2. It is shaped like the Fold 2, but now has a soft feel like the Z Fold 3, hence the name Z Flip 3. This squared off shape feels so much nicer than the original Flip, and honestly is one of the reasons why I can easily recommend this phone to everyone, not just tech people. The glass on the back and the front are now technically flat and matte or glossy, depending on what color you get. The white one is honestly my favorite color style, and it has a matte white glass, while colors like the cream have a glossy glass. On the front, we get a bigger and much needed 1.9-inch OLED display that is 260 by 512 pixels, which translates to 302 pixels per inch. Similar to last year, it's not as useful as a Motorola Razr, but eventually Samsung will make it better. Just not in this form. At least they finally gave us an always-on display. Besides the screen, we get a slightly moved dual outer camera setup, which hasn't really changed since last year. On the left side, we get the SIM card tray, some basic antenna lines, and the 5G ultra-wideband cutout. On the right, we get the volume buttons and fingerprint power button combo, which is pretty much the same as the previous Flips. The top has a single mic, while the bottom has two mics, as well as USB-C 3.1 port that only does 15 watts of charging, which I really don't understand. Then we get the bottom loudspeaker, which is finally paired with a top loudspeaker, finally giving us stereo sound. And then when we open up the phone, a bunch of plastic. We can finally see the 6.7-inch 1080p, obviously flexible, increased OLED display that features a 22:9 screen ratio, 425 pixels per inch, and finally a 120 Hz refresh rate. Having used the iPhone 13 Pro alongside this phone, the 120 Hz display seemed pretty normal really quickly to me, but it will definitely be a treat coming from the traditional 60 Hz display. But really, the 60 Hz to 120 Hz display is the only difference in all three of these flip phones. So you may not really care or may not even notice too much of a difference moving from this, unlike the Fold series, which literally had different screens inside and out for all three phones. This is still a plastic screen, so scratching is still a thing, but apparently damaging the OLED is not impossible, but definitely harder to do. However, I'm not testing that feature out. On the top portion, we get a 10 megapixel front camera as a hole punch, which, just like the outer cameras, you guessed it, hasn't changed. The phone is also water resistant, being IPX8, meaning dust resistance was not certified. Either way, I'm not putting this phone in water either. I'll let some other YouTubers test that out. Speaking of the internals, the phone is powered by a dual cell battery totaling 3,300 milliamps, 15 watt charging, 10 watt wireless charging, wireless power share, and pretty much it lasts a full day. And all of these features are exactly like, well, you know. But in all seriousness, the battery is decent on this phone, and 2-day battery life isn't really needed, but could be possible if required. To drain this battery, we finally get something new, a modern-day Snapdragon 888 chip with 8GB of RAM and an interesting option of either 128 or 256GB of storage. The former, I'm not so happy about. As for the performance, it's very similar to the Samsung S21, even with the added flip software aspects, which translates to a bunch of pointless small screen features, which for me is a waste, but it does give you an interesting kickstand. Personally, I would only use this for the camera features. But overall, a very solid device at a better price than last year, dropping from $1,380 on the LTE version and $1,450 on the 5G version to a reasonable $1,000. And the only downgrade was the storage, starting at 128GB rather than 256. Honestly, this is what makes this phone so popular. People want this style, know that the specs will make this phone absolutely amazing, and it's actually somewhat affordable. But what about the most important part? Similar to the Galaxy S20 to the S21, the cameras are the same as all the other Z Flips. And really the only difference that I can find is that the Z Flip3 has Gorilla Glass DX, which will make the camera glass be super clear, but apparently only on the wide sensor. The outer cameras are 12 megapixel sensors, one being a wide sensor, while the other is a 123-degree ultra-wide camera. Both work well, getting the job done, as well as allowing for 4K at 60 frames per second on the standard sensor and 4K 30 frames per second on the ultra-wide sensor. I'll give you some time and music to listen to as you watch the pictures and the videos that I took with these cameras. Enjoy. As for the front camera, again, the same non-focusing 10 megapixel front camera, which honestly isn't that bad, but it is strange thinking that the Samsung Galaxy S10e has a better quality camera than any of the folding Samsung phones that have ever been released. Of course, you can still do this little party trick, as well as this one, if you want to take selfies or even a video without opening up the phone. Wait, is that called a video-y? I have no idea. There is no zooming sensors, no 48 megapixel or bigger sensors. There's just 3 sensors on this phone, but at $1,000, I guess it fits better than the $1,450 5G version with the same cameras. Just like most Samsung phones, we get a bunch of other options in the camera app. But I gotta say, point and shoot always works out so well on Samsung phones, and this one is included in that. And this is where I fail to understand this phone. It is cool, opening up the phone, closing it when you're mad, or you're showing someone that the phone even folds. This aspect never really goes away because people are still learning that this phone actually exists. But if you're like me and you don't really care to show people this, you start to wonder why you even need a folding or flipping phone. Okay, that sounded weird, but you know what I mean. In the Z Fold style, it makes sense to me, going from a phone to a tablet, but it's just like how I explained it on my Z Flip review. This style just doesn't really make sense to me. For the flip style, this is possibly the best, giving us a large screen and user experience with very little interruptions. But why don't I just buy a phone that's already opened? This phone is smaller, but feels awkward in the pocket. It doesn't really add extra space when storing the phone. Then the screen is extremely prone to scratching, which you'll have to look at forever if it does happen. But hey, maybe it's because I just choose not to find the benefits of this style. But like I said before, I don't think this style is the one that you should go for, moving from the pager to the phone. The phone to tablet is how I see the future of folding phones. At this point, you should understand that I don't get this phone, but also I can see how this phone is already selling out so well. Samsung actually did a really good job on this phone. They made this phone top of the line. They did add in some dated cameras, but they work pretty well. While 128 gigabytes is standard, somewhat low for some phones, but in most cases 128 gigabytes is pretty normal, the rest of the specs are in line with all the expensive flagship phones. Last year, the question was, why spend $1,450 on a folding phone when you can get the same phone, but better, out of the S20 Plus for $1,200, or even moving forward from that in getting the S20 Ultra for $1,400. This year, the S21 Plus and Z Flip3 are almost identical, and they now share the same $1,000 price tag. The Z Flip was often advertised showing that women should buy this phone, which I personally thought was cringy, kind of using it as like a makeup thing. I always thought that was kind of weird, but this year, this phone seems very neutral, fitting in all demographics, as it should have been the whole time. Personally, I've seen many different age groups buying this phone, which is something I never saw with the Z Flip before. Will they keep the phone? Who knows? All I know is that I actually enjoyed using this phone over the Z Flip and the S21, but there is no way that I can keep this phone. However, this color is amazing, but just this one. The other ones are pretty ugly in my opinion. And that's my review of the Samsung Z Flip 3. This is a phone that is now safe to recommend, checking all the boxes, even though I would have liked to see a 256GB storage standard and an updated camera and battery department. Like the Z Fold 2, they took a decent design and made it better, but this time dropped the price a lot. Lacking a headset jack is somewhat expected nowadays, especially from a folding device, but water resistance is a big step. I am interested to see what Samsung will do in the future, but I do know that this style is unfortunately not for me. But maybe it's for you. I'll leave links in the description for where you can buy this phone, as well as some extras. Unfortunately, you can't buy this color on Amazon or anything like that. You can only buy it from Samsung, and it may take you a while. It took me about 5 weeks to get it. But trust me, it's worth the wait. If you like the phone, obviously. If you don't like the phone, it's clearly not worth the wait. I hope you enjoyed my review of the Samsung Z Flip 3, and I hope you're having a wonderful day. And as always, thanks for watching.